This is the Pepa that really caught my eye, Pepa 10. This is really exciting as a kind of poster that's telling the person in Rarotonga, sharing the excitement about what a printing press is.
Ko te tūtū te ia, no te roromi anga tutua. Kāre tau e rawenga nei I kitea nā I taito rā. Ko matau tō taito I te tātā ua I tā rātou tutua I runga I te kiri māmoe. It's always a bit difficult when you're reading these old texts because the language has evolved a bit in 150 years. When I first read this, I thought, what does it mean by roromi? They're talking about a printing press. Roromi anga tutua, which translate as literally pressing down words. Pepa or pepa, in everyday Cook Islands Māori today, we would say peapa to refer to paper. For this time, with all these new items and ideologies and concepts coming into their world, they had to just keep coming up with words, and sometimes it was easier to just transliterate it, but other times they'll come up with quite interesting ways to express it. Just to see a small printed image with such fine details must have been really something new. Also, just printing itself, I think the fact that the letters were able to be replicated identically every time would have been really fascinated from a culture of ours where carving and tatatau tattooing were, I guess, our closest versions of a written language. Even though we replicated patterns many times, and the most aesthetic patterns were normally those that were replicated near identically, they were never identical. We take it for granted now. We're so used to seeing, digital and printed text. But this is actually something new, I think, would have been new for our tupuna.
When you see them on the screen, because we got them digitised, they kind of look A4 kind of posters, but they're actually interesting to see the length. It's almost maybe what they might call foolscap. And the typeface is a real poster typeface. It's called Thorogood. It was developed in the 1830s in England. In America, you'd see them on a wanted poster. Here, you're seeing them as quite powerful messages. I got the memoir of the Reverend Aaron Buzzicott, who was based as the kind of missionary in Rarotonga at that time. What I found in his memoir is that he'd gone back to do printing of the Bible in 1849. He wasn't in Rarotonga. The printing that was done in Rarotonga, they talked about an arithmetic book, but they didn't talk about any of the Pepa. So I kind of wondering whether the team of Cook Island men who were actually trained to do some of the printing, whether they made these posters as things to really communicate what they felt was important to share. And I guess the other interesting thing was just seeing how ephemeral poster, which is something that hardly survives, has survived. We've seen things getting disbound and bound and put into different places. And so with the Pepa, they number up to at least 11. We've only got 5.
Okay, so this Pepa is just talking about what the letters are, and they're broken up into the Māori alphabet, sounds that they were familiar with. So it's got the vowels, a, e, I, o, u, and also the consonants. The Tahitian Bible used V, where we would use W. And over time, over successive generations of teaching the language through this written form, even though people could read V and pronounce it as W, as people were corrected that no, a V should be pronounced as a V sound, it gradually took hold. We would say vai for water was originally wai, and vaine was waine for woman. Then you've got the letter papa'a, the English letters. You have varying origins of what the word papa'a means. It can be literally translated as 4 layers, which is said to have referred to when the people arrived on ships, they would normally wear 4 layers of clothing. You think of Captain Cook and the way that they look, they've got all these multiple layers. This is the Lord's Prayer in Cook Islands Māori. The missionaries, in terms of when they arrived to each island, there was no set plan on how they would put the language into writing. They would just sort of, okay, well that sounds like a V, let's write V. Once it was written, that was it. Like, you can't go back and change it. We've lost a lot of that uniqueness within villages and islands because of the written language. Okay, this Pepa 11, it's still a very good message. It's saying respect your parents, or your metua tāne and your metua waine. Don't steal and don't lie. The Rarotongan people had some of the best literacy rates of anywhere in the world at that time. The missionaries actually talked about it was very hard for him to find any child between 8 and 10 years who was unable to read and write. By 1849, it was probably like that most people would be able to look at this and read it and confidently understand what the messages are. Ko Jehovah te atua ora, e mea pikikaa te au itoro o te etene. Ko Jesu te ako ora mau. This is saying Jehovah is the living God, the God of salvation, the one that if you believe in, you'll live. That word etene has a lot of negative connotations today, because when people talk about our ancestors prior to their conversion to Christianity, they're considered heathens. All our arikis and our mataiapos, our chiefs, if they were to prove that they were serious about becoming Christians and accessing all the wealth and opportunities and knowledge that the missionaries were offering them, they were told you have to burn your idols and you have to destroy your marais. So yeah, they would take all their carved items and chuck them on the fires, and there's all sorts of descriptions in these early missionary records about that. That's something I think we're still grappling with as a community, is how to be confident about the things that our ancestors did and the amazing way that they lived in such a sort of sense of harmony with nature, something that we're all trying to reclaim today as people. And we've got so much to learn from them, but we often sort of feel uncomfortable delving into that knowledge because it conflicts with the common attitudes or beliefs that to be Cook Islands is to be staunchly Christian, but that can't operate at the same time as being staunchly proud of the achievements of your ancestors, or at least a large significant part of them.
Oh, nice.
So at the moment we're looking at the Pepa, different peppers that was printed in the Pacific, mainly in Cook Islands, Rarotonga. We brought in some of our Cook Island communities from the libraries and also external.
E tō mātou metua I te aora, kia tapu tō o ingoa, kia tai tō o Pasirea, kia rawe ia tō o anono I te inua nei, I te rangi katoa. You always go to bed, you say in the morning prayer. Yeah.
So it really hasn't changed.
No, it's not changed. That's it.
Yeah.
That's so.
Set in stone or in type. Yeah. Pepa 11, I think it's one of my favourites, which I can read a few of those words. So I really like that. One of the 10 Commandments, honour your father and your mother.
Today I'm really, really happy to have a look at the Pepa that have been placed up for us. It's about being connected to our ancestors, and it gets quite emotional sometimes looking at those pieces. I think today especially has been really cool. I get to see it with my dad.
I don't know if I can remember the old days prayer in Raro, but it's more like this one here.
Okay.
But that's the end.
Yeah.
But we don't mention this Itoro.
The word etene gets used quite often, the savage people, and reference back to a lot of the old Mangaean war dress, which is like a cone-shaped mask. Being born in New Zealand and being raised in my culture, I've had the benefit of understanding who I am, where I come from, what grounds me, and seeing the Pepa itself has reiterated the understanding of genealogy, of Indigenous knowledge, of understanding of different concepts, of who we are as a people, who we are as a community, and being able to share space with people who have the same interests as me in terms of these people and how they relate to us is really important.
Matao. I'm happy to come here. Tā mau e kia akakara i te ia tutu, nunga i te Pepa. Ki te no, pera katoa aka pai i te tamariki, te api i a rato, kia marama rato. Tō rātu tupuna, pera katoa i tō rātu aimitua i te tuatu moa. So I am happy to be here. It is very good. I enjoy it. I think it's make my day.
I remember vividly that it was quite hard for me to find information on the printing press and anything really that came out of the printing press. With the Aotearoa New Zealand Histories curriculum coming out and focusing on local histories, I feel like this is a very important step for, I guess, the Cook Islands to really take a look at what kind of local history needs to be put out there.
And I think our generation now is the one trying to reclaim that knowledge as best we can, especially if we're here. So having written evidence of what our ancestors have helped to document in its truest form is a great thing to pass down.
It's something that will help our new generation to learn all our culture things in the old days. It is nice to remember.
The whole purpose of the library is to make things available to people, and there is really no point having a collection if it stays in the box and nobody even understands what it is. So librarians have always been really focused on making a listing and sharing what that listing is, and then people out in the world look at that list and go, yeah, I want to see that one. But actually, they're not always the right people to describe something. They don't necessarily know. They might be able to literally say they can read what the top thing says, but they actually don't know what it is that they're looking at. So the really exciting possibility with the Pacific Virtual Museum is actually getting the material back to where it was actually made and shared with the people it was made for. And I think the more people who actually understand what they're looking at, that we can get around the table to look at them, the more I'm able to appreciate and learn and become a kind of kit to maybe inspire people to make new Pepa and use them as a way of getting different words out. Yeah.